June was an oddly rough month for me. It was filled with experimentation, hype, lack of motivation, just a little bit of failure. Let me explain. As I started last month, I wanted to try to start recording myself painting my miniatures. Plan was to talk through what I was doing and try to mesh everything together in the end. So I recorded my intro and explained that I was going to painting Katakros' cape in a muted green. Now, for my Undead armies, my goal is to try to stick more cool colors than warm. The idea behind this being that without the warm tones on the miniatures, they would feel less lively. So I filmed myself gathering my greens, starting with my base tone of Reef Green by scale 75. I explained that for any shadows that I wanted darker than this, I was going to mix together the Reef Green with Ultra Blue, also from scale, and a bit of Abaddon Black from Citadel. I would then slowly build up my midtones by mixing in Citadel's Florian Forest, Garsnick Green, and finally Norgling Green. The final highlight being a mix of the Nurgling Green and Grey Ghost by Vallejo. Now I started laying down my colors onto the inside of the cape or attaching it to the body of the model. Katakros is a large named model for the Osearch Bone Reapers, and I wanted him to stand out from the rest of the army. Only ever going to have one of these models, so I want to take my time establishing my colors and my theming to this model and to make sure that everything is just the way I want it. In my excitement of my first day, I explained that I wanted to add some midtones under Katakros, just make sure some of the folds inside of the cape stood out. But that the majority of my highlights would just be focused on the folds right underneath his left arm. I used sort of a stippling method in order to build up a worn cloth texture onto the cape to match the rest of the diorama models that I have painted previously. Now, in my excitement, I was also as bold as to talk about how I wanted the composition of my paint scheme for the cape to draw your eye to Katakros' body. Now, with all this done, in a day, I thought I would be done with the cape in no time. I started editing my video down. Now, I wanted to use time lapses of my footage with the parts of me talking picked out as a voiceover / story. And for the most part, the first day of the editing went very well. I had managed to get my hour down to about 20 minutes, and in my foolishness, I thought I would be done shortly with a decent video. After editing, I went on to my next steps, attaching the cape, trying to hide the seams where the parts of the models meet. For this, I would use green stuff. Now, I've been told by several different YouTube channels that Milliput would probably be better for this type of job. Hardens a bit better, and you can sand it to get those really smooth, crisp edges. Also a bit easier to blend in with shaping tools. Barone. So I had to make do with it. Now, for anyone who hasn't worked with green stuff before, she's a fickle mistress. So I mixed up my yellow and my blue in what I thought was about 50-50 ratio to make a nice green, and began working on hiding these seams. Keeping both my hands and my tools wet with water, I rolled out some small tubes and applied them to the seams I wanted to hide. Now, I'm still quite new to using green stuff, but I know that my best bet in order to get smooth edges is to use silicone tools. Now, this requires a lot of patience, as green stuff is extremely sticky and will take the form of anything pressed against it, especially fingerprints. So after hiding 2 of my 3 themes on the cape, I needed to put Katakros down to harden in order to keep myself from pressing any fingerprints into the side of the cape that I had started with. Now this is where I got a bit distracted from my original goal. Now if you remember my video last month, I said that I had gotten nothing really done because I was working on my night haunts. Well, someone had a lot of green stuff left over. And night haunts have some real bad seams. In order to not let any of my green stuff go to waste, or as little as possible, I stopped filming and started cleaning up my ghost. Then I realized I was going to have more green stuff in the future, and I didn't want that to go to waste either, so I began building additional models I didn't have put together before. Pretty much just about anything I had laying about. After about a day or 2 of this, I managed to get myself to finish my green stuff work on Katakros. I then began my work on the other parts of Katakros that I needed to glue down before I started working on the back of the cape. So this would be Katakros' spear arm, his dagger, and an extra fold on the cape. I also painted up his helm and the buttons holding on the cape at this time, since I had the paints out anyways. Why waste materials? Now the blade and the buttons used the same paint scheme that I had stolen from Drakari armor videos many years ago. And the remaining bits got just a simple silver slapped onto them to finish them off. About here is when I started doing my second day of editing. Now I had 4 days of footage that ran a total of about 3.5 hours. And I began my time-lapse process again. Mind you, none of this footage was meant to be the focus of my video. The focus of my video was supposed to be me doing the cape. This was more of what's known as B footage or B rolls. Meant to enhance the story, meant to enhance the video, but it didn't need to show everything. However, my brain told me that if I filmed it, I should use all of it, and suddenly my video was over 2 hours long. I realized that this moment I had made a mistake in how I wanted to make this video. I began desperately trying to find a fix without restarting the entire thing or losing any of what I filmed. I quickly shortened my time lapse, getting my times down to a little bit over an hour, and moved back to painting. I began the back of the cape, understanding that I wanted to keep the insides of the folds very dark while bringing the rest of the cape up to a much brighter color than what I had painted before. After all, this is where the light source would be, since Katakros' body's not in the way, and also this would enhance the model from normal viewing distance, which is a few feet, or displayed on a shelf. These over-exaggerations would help the cape feel like the fabric was more folding in on itself rather than it was a flat plane. Now, I used the same stippling methods and colors that I used on the inside, focusing more on my mid-tones on the broader, flat parts of the folds. Meanwhile, the entire time, in the back of my head, I'm mulling over how I want to fix my video. Knowing that every single minute that I record the back of this cape is going to enhance the overlong length of my entire video of what I now saw as long and boring. With the additional 2 hours of painting that I was planning on doing, I didn't know how I was going to get a video that I would watch out of what I was recording, and that's when it hit me. As I was painting on my first set of highlights, a mixture of Snarstick green and Nurgling green, I didn't know who I was making this video for. I was no longer making this video for myself, nor was I making it for anyone else. I was just making this video to fill some arbitrary checkbox I had created for myself. I just stopped. Now, I spent my next week away from Katakros, rethinking everything, not just the video, but why I wanted to post things online in general. I began to go into one of my downward spirals back into kind of a comfortable depression that I can easily and sometimes often find myself in. With no motivation, no spark, just the large question of why hanging and repeating in my head over and over again. Thankfully, I'm much more open about these types of things nowadays due to me having a fairly good support system that I didn't have even 5 years ago. It took a lot of work to build up and some therapy, but did do that. So I started opening up about my video problems with my fiance. We would often watch other crafters' videos on YouTube, and we began talking about some of the more technical sides of things. Things like cameras, editing, how to tell a decent story with a video, etc. This let me kind of think of things and vent a bit, while still kind of getting back a bit of a voice of reasoning to prevent me from spiraling too hard. And also, since artists pretend to be their hardest critics, she actually also offered to watch what I had made in order to see whether or not it actually was decent. I didn't let her, because artists are their harshest critics. I started building additional models. I started looking into additional rule systems. I started planning other armies. Anything as long as it wasn't painting, because I knew that as soon as I sat down to paint, it would have to be Katakros again. And I still had the urge to record it, but no will to do anything with said recording. I was then in the middle of a weird combination of self-improvement and hobby videos when I noticed that a lot of miniature painting videos that I watched were not about painting. They're telling a story. Sometimes that story is as simple as how to pull off a cool technique, but others are just kind of about how their month or week went, pulled around the context of paint and plastic. So I realized I had a story to tell myself. I had a story about how I really wanted to try something. I failed at it and decided to start. Hopefully doing a better job of making something a bit more entertaining the second time. This also gave me an audience to create for, which is myself. Oddly enough, you have to make something for someone. I know me best. With new motivation, I picked back up Katakros and quickly finished my highlights. Now, I knew I wanted to add a little bit of freehand to the back of his cape. After all, like I said, Katakros is a big-named model in the army. I'm never going to have one of them. Now, long ago, I had decided that the symbols of my Bone Reapers was going to be an hourglass, thanks to a YouTube channel that unfortunately no longer exists. Or fortunately, that was their plan. So I know that at least one of these things are going on the cape. Now, I quickly realized that a nice trim around the outside of the cape would work very well. Figuring out where to place that hourglass was a different story. My first thought was to add the hourglass to the corners of the cape, something that you see on some Space Marine models. But one corner is hidden underneath some folds, and the other corner is been eaten away by time. Yay, undead problems. While I thought about it, I started gathering blues I wanted to use. My base tone was Huldra Blue, while I had a low mid-tone of the Fang by Citadel, a high mid-tone of Rust Grey, and a highlight of Blue Horror. Because I like to mix my Space Wolf with Zenich, because I can. So I began painting on the trim while I tried to work out where I wanted to add my hourglass. Sometimes it's just better to push ahead and figure things out as you go. With no other options, I decided just to place the Hourglass in the middle of the back, right underneath that weird, silly fold for his back crab. And then I did my best to match my shadows, midtones, and highlights of my freehand areas to the rest of the cape. Now, with the cape finally finished, all that was left to do was video. That's when I realized I had too many different thoughts on my process going on. So I've done the one thing that I haven't done before. I wrote a script. And this is where it ends. Hi. Yeah, I don't know how to end this video. I wanted to do something a bit more candid. Kind of like a wrap-up thoughts thing. So a lot more ums in this, because I'm not reading anything. I'm trying to think of words. I think I'm far happier with this video than I have been for any of my other videos. It seems the most coherent. It let me do what I actually want to do, which is talk about my painting while showing things. The only issue I have with it is that it was not my initial goal. You might think to yourself, Bob, why is that an issue? Well, if this video had been my initial goal from the beginning, there's a lot of extra scenes that I would have attempted to film. may or may not have succeeded, I don't know. I'd only really have the 2 web cameras and my cell phone to work with. So, you know, issues abound. So like I said, I don't know how to end this. That's kind of my thoughts on the last month. It took me a full month to get through a cape. However, at the end of it, like I said, I enjoyed this video. I'm probably going to do more scripted videos in the future. I don't have a reason not to. It works a lot better for me because I don't have that disconnect between my thoughts and what I want to say, because I already did that off camera. So I think it's going to end up being less stilted, or more stilted maybe. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a thing that works out better for me personally. Now, it does mean I'm going to try to do some additional things in the future. B-roll footage, me doing simple things, mixing paints, yada yada yada. But I don't think that's a bad thing. If anything, what I basically ended up proving to myself by switching over to this other process is that I am more likely to enjoy the process of video creation and create something that I personally consider better by taking the additional time to do the additive steps. Now, am I going to do those steps? Yeah, hopefully. The next couple of months are going to be pretty interesting for me. I still plan on doing at least a once a month update vlog or behind the scenes, but I think my next video is going to be a how to paint bones video centered around the start of me doing Nagash. There are 1.5 million things that I would love to do for this channel. I don't have the time to do them. Unfortunately, due to drive times and the fact that I get unpaid lunches, my work takes 10.5 hours out of my day. You know, combine that to 5 days a week. On top of that, doing just household chores. I'm lucky to get half an hour of hobby stuff in general, and the videos eat into that as well. So Nagash, who I was originally expecting to take probably all of June, probably a little bit of August, I might get wrapped up in November. Just because of doing more than potentially necessary. How do I want to end this? I never know how to end these. I have a dinosaur. Dinosaur's gonna come and get you now, okay. Here are What'd you think?
I like it.